Hey guys, welcome back to How to Build a Blog with Laravel. This is part number 4, and today we're going to learn about building controllers, or getting started building controllers. So this is going to be kind of an introduction to the controllers. We've been learning about MVC, which is model view controllers. The last video we talked about views. Now it's time to move on to controllers. So hang tight and let's get ready to build them controllers. All right, guys, so we're just going to dive right in. Basically, I have the code that we had in the last video open up on my screen. So if you are following along, just go ahead and, or if you just barely watched the last video, then you should be set. We're just picking up where we left off. If not, go ahead, open up your project in a text editor, and then I've also got my terminal open in the blog folder, and I'm currently running the server right now. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Okay, now just to recap, in the last video we created these 3 routes, and it's for our static pages. The home page, which is currently called welcome, we're going to change that to home soon. An about page, obviously an about us type page, and then a contact page, which is a contact page, right? Now, none of these pages do anything yet. We haven't, the URLs work, but we haven't created like a contact form, but all that's coming down the road. Just bear with us. However, before we get there, it's important to kind of learn our way. And in the last video, we used our routes to route our application directly to some views. And this works really good in practice. So just to recap again, when we go back to our video here, we've got our home page. If we go to about, our about page works, and then obviously the contact page does exactly what we would expect it to do as well. So we're definitely sitting in good company here. It appears to be working, but obviously there's always a better way to do this because we do not want, one of the points of MVC is keeping logic out of certain files. Most of the logic should be in the controllers, if you remember back to the video. Going over the process one more time is, as soon as our application knows exactly what to do, it knows the route that you want to go to, it should go to the controller first. The controller should then determine what needs to happen to accomplish this task. If it needs to go to the database and get information from the database, then it needs to call up the model and then talk to the model. The model goes out to the database, gets the information, brings it back, transfers it back to the controller. The controller will process any data that needs to happen. If we're validating, if we need to concatenate strings, whatever needs to happen to kind of process the logic or the data. And it does all of that inside the controller. And then the view should simply be the representation of the controller's data. So the controller should let the view know that it's time to render. And it may also pass information into the view. But the view itself should never run any functions or anything like that. So that's kind of the process, and that's our main goal that we're trying to accomplish here. So how do we do that with what we've been given in Laravel? Because right now we just have basically a function that returns a view. So how are we going to get there? Well, first of all, we really should never have a function in our routes file. The routes file should be nice and clean. So let's go ahead and just get rid of this function. Well, before we get rid of the function, let's go ahead and undo that. We need to make a controller first, because without the controller, obviously we can't route through the controller. So let's go ahead and make a controller first. So let's go up. You guys should remember that in our app folder, under HTTP, there's a controllers folder. And I said, we talked about this before, I said all of our controllers will be saved in here. And I wasn't lying. Let's go ahead and make this happen. I'm going to go right click on controllers and click new file. We're going to create a new file and save it. And we're going to call it the pages controller. The reason I'm calling it pages controller is because this is going to be a controller that handles all of our static pages. We're going to have another controller that handles the posts, and another one that might handle the users. But this one handles the all the static pages. So I'm just going to call it the pages controller. It's not really important that it's called pages controller, but that's just what we're going to call it, so it's representative of what it does. As a normal thing, you would normally put controller at the end. So you'd put like what it is and then controller at the end. So it'll be, in this case, pages, capital, controller. And then obviously it ends with a PHP because Laravel's based off of PHP. So go ahead and click save. This creates in our controllers folder, we've got a pages controller. Let's go ahead and click that. And now it's time to make the controller. So we need to obviously open this up with a PHP symbol there, just to identify that everything in here is PHP. Hopefully you know that if you worked with PHP before. The next thing we need to do in when working in Laravel, and this is a new thing with Laravel 5. I know it was Laravel 5, it might have been 5.1, but as of right now, what you're working in, you need to do this. You have to namespace all of your controllers, and they have to be namespaced into this folder called of app HTTP controllers. And for those that don't know what that is, namespaces are like little containers and boxes. Basically what they do is you're saying you belong in this folder. You can move around inside the folder, but you can't leave this folder unless you get explicit permission. And that's basically what we're doing with namespaces, saying you belong in here, and that place that they belong in is this app HTTP controllers folder. So if we need to point to another controller, we can, but it belongs in this controller. Okay, so we're going to namespace it, and we're going to type app. We have to capitalize app. So app backslash. With namespacing, we always do backslashes, HTTP, and then we're going to do controllers. Also, for those of you that don't know where the backslash is, it is above. It's not your normal slash. It's not the one next to the shift key. It is the one that's above the enter key and below the backspace key over there on the right. So this is a normal slash, and this is a backslash. Okay, we should be good there. Got to give it a semicolon, and then we come down here. Now, if we wanted it to access other things outside of this folder, since it's kind of locked down into this folder, if we needed it to access something else, then we would just use the keyword use, and then we would tell it where to go. So if you saw earlier that we had like illuminate, and there were a bunch of illuminate files. So that's where we're telling it, okay, go outside of where you belong, go out here, it's okay. You can go out here to access certain things. And we just have to use the use command. We don't need any of that for our controllers. It's a basic controller. So what we're going to do next is actually start the controller. We're going to use the word class because controllers are simply a PHP class. Call it pages controller. And then if you remember back to the last video, I said that the controller, there's this controller file that has it's kind of like the boilerplate for all the controllers, and everything extends controller, right? So that's what we need to do here. So we can't just do pages control or class pages controller. We have to say it's actually pages controller extends and then controller, like that. Then we can do our brackets. And everything we put in here are going to be inside of our controller. Now, the next thing that we can do is we would basically create each page into what we call actions. So every page or request is going to be an action, and each action is a function. So to do that, we do public function. If it's not public, then it can't be accessed publicly. It can only be accessed from within other things in the namespace, other controllers. So public function, okay, and then whatever we want to call it. Now, there is kind of a convention that you're not required to use. You can call it whatever you want, but there is a convention that I tend to follow, and I was taught when I learning Laravel kind of doing the same thing, which is we usually preface every single function with the type of request it's going to make. Now, if you don't understand this, don't get this tripped up on you, but there's different type of HTTP requests. Most requests, if you just go to a website and you click enter on the URL and it loads the web page, that is a GET request. Okay, those are the most traditional types of requests that we make on the internet. Another popular type of request is a POST request, and a POST request is most commonly occurs when you submit a form. So you fill out a contact form, for example, you click submit. The web server actually posts now the data to another page, the page processes it, and then usually will redirect to another page. And that request is a post, and it usually isn't something that you can just do in the browser. It usually needs to be done by the server via like a form or something like that. So that's kind of a post request, and there's other requests, and we're going to learn these as we work, because with Laravel we'll learn these. There's also delete requests, and there's also put requests, and those are often for like updating data, and delete is obviously for like deleting data. So these are other types of requests we can do, and we generally preface the name of our function with or the name of our action with either get, post, put, or delete, depending on what we're doing. So in this case, this is a get because we want to create a function for when people go to the home page, right? So we're just going to do get index because index is the home. And when someone goes to the home page, they're just using a get request. So we use the word get, and then I usually capitalize index because that's the name of the page. So we need to do obviously the parentheses here. We're not passing anything in, but we just need to do empty parentheses, and then we have our brackets. So there's our public function get index, and then we can also do another one, function get about, and then we'll do another one that is public function contact, get contact, because again they're going to get contact. Now, just to demonstrate what I was just talking about, there is a possibility as we get going that when we submit that contact form, we might just do something like this. Instead of get contact, we would post contact. And we would have that contact form submit to post contact, where it would process the form data, send a notification to us, an email or whatever, and then maybe redirect them to the homepage or something like that. All of that can happen in a separate one. So now we would have a function that handles when someone just goes to the contact page, that's the get contact. And then when it's submitted, we would do the post contact. So that's kind of to demonstrate, that's kind of what these get and these posts are. All right, now you'll see in a second, I'm going to go ahead and just leave post contact actually for now. Well, let's just go ahead and delete it just so it's not confusing. So these are the actions we have: get index, get about, get contact. And now it's time to tell the routes to point to this controller and to use these actions in the controller to process our data. So let's go over to our routes file, and here you can see that instead of having a function, I'm going to delete this function, and instead what we're going to do is we're going to kind of follow this formula. We're going to tell it pages controller. So we're saying, hey, go to the pages controller, and then we use an @ sign and tell it which part in the pages controller to go to. Now in this case, this is the contact page, and it's the get request. We know it's get because it says get right here. If we wanted to post contact, sure enough, we would write post, and this would be if someone went to our contact on a post request, then we would tell it to do post contact. Does that make sense? But we're not doing that. We're going to do, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to do get. So if someone does a get request, we'll do get contact in the pages controller. Okay, and so now when we go to there, it's not going to render the view anymore. It's just going to go to the pages controller and then do whatever is inside the get contact page. So it's going to go in here and it's going to execute the code inside of here. Now, just to prove that, what I want to do is I'm going to say return, and we're just going to say hello contact page. And this is just raw text. This is not using the view that we had earlier. And we'll see that in just a second here. So I'm going to come over here. We're going to refresh our contact page. This is the nice one that used our view. And now we refresh, and we're getting an error. Let's see here. Oh, I forgot to put my semicolon. I have to apologize in advance. I've been working a huge project I do freelance work, and I've been doing a huge project the last few months with Ruby on Rails. And so Ruby on Rails is like drilled in my head, and we don't use semicolons in Ruby. And so I might run into this problem a lot. But anyway, so we forgot the semicolon. So let's come back and let's just refresh. And now we're getting kind of what I expected to happen. And so all it's saying is hello contact page. And that's because it's actually now, instead of going to the view, it goes to this controller and it's rendering what it outputs, what it's returning. So this is exactly what's happening now. So now we know that we're going through the controller. And since we haven't changed these yet, these are still going through the views. So when we go to About, we're still accessing the view, but we're going to change that here. And we're going to tell this one, once again, just like the last one, to do Pages Controller. And we're going to do Get About. And then I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing for the home page. Just like that. And look how much cleaner this is too. Do you see how much easier this is to manage? It helps a lot. Okay, so we're gonna come back here, and you can see that we're going to go to About, and About's not gonna render anything. Why doesn't it render anything? Well, that's just because in our Pages controller, we don't have it rendering anything. So once again, we're gonna say return, and we're gonna say, we'll just say About Me. And then we'll just put this one, we'll just return home. All right, so once again, About, we get About Me, and then this, the home page, we just get home. Okay, so it's working. Now, what we would normally do in a controller is kind of this process. You would normally process any like variable datas or parameters. And these are like parameters that might be passed in through the URL or through a post request or something like that. We would normally process that, maybe validate it, but we're going to process the data. We will usually talk to the model as the next step, and potentially the model would then maybe update the database or something like that. And then we would usually receive data back from the model. We would compile or process the data again if needed. And then the last step then would be to pass that data to the correct view. Okay, and then that's kind of the process you would normally follow inside this controller. And so you can see here that this is where we collect all of our data. It's not cluttered with the HTML. It's all in its perfect space. So hopefully you're now starting to see where the MVC mindset comes from. So now everything has its place. If it's being presented to someone, it happens in the view. If it's logical and needs to be processed, or it's anything like that, happens in the controller. And then the model handles the database. So I don't have SQL data. I don't have SQL. I'm not writing SQL code in here. That happens in the model. And I'm also not writing HTML in here. That happens in the view. The view doesn't have logic. The view doesn't have SQL code. You can kind of see how it all works. It's nice and clean. And so now, hopefully, it's kind of coming together. Again, this is a very simple controller because all it's going to do is basically point to the view, because there's not much really to do because it's a static page. So that's what we're going to do here. So now we're just going to simply say return view. So return our view. We saw this same thing before, and we're going to call it the welcome view. Okay, so then there's that. And we'll just do the same thing with all of these. So return view and the about view. And this is exactly what we did in our function before. And you can see that basically we just recreated the function, but we've torn it out of the routes file and put it in the controller, which is where it belongs. And then the other nice thing is, because we'll have multiple controllers, all these controllers will be more organized. We know the pages controller will contain all the pages. Soon we'll have a posts controller. So anything related to posts is in the post controller, and so forth. So I have a comments controller, so anything related to comments are in the comments controller. So it helps keep them organized even inside of there. And then within the controller, there's different actions where we know everything for that page, the logic's here, and so forth. So it's really clean and organized, and that's the most important thing. All right. Next, let's just test what we've done. We're going back to our database, our server. We can see that we have the old data. I'm going to refresh and we get the new one. So we're pointing now to the view, which is exactly what we wanted. I'm going to go to About, and that works. And then I'm going to go to Contact, and that should work as well. Perfect. So we're getting exactly what we wanted. And our views are still over here working exactly as they should. Now the next thing, the last thing I want to do before we finish this video is clean up our views file. I don't like our views folder. I don't like just having a whole bunch of views folder files just sitting in the bottom of the folder. I like to organize them. And I usually like to organize them by the controller so that they're really easy to find. And so what I would do in this case is I go to our views folder. I'm going to say new folder, and we're going to create a folder called pages. So this would belong to the pages controller. Okay, that's why it's called pages. If we had a posts controller, I would make a folder called posts. And we're going to go ahead and move all of these folders into the pages folder. Now, the best way for me to do that is going to be inside of Finder, because I can't do it in Sublime. And we're just going to go to, let's see, resources, views, and we're going to take this welcome, contact, and about, and just move it into pages. So now they're inside of pages. And let me close that. So now in our pages folders, we have views, pages, and then all of our about, contact, and welcome are inside there. So it's nice and organized. Coming back to our website, refresh, we're going to get an error. And you should have expected that because in our controller, we set it to go to welcome. And again, because we didn't tell it where it was, it just assumes it's in the views folder like it was before. And it was just sitting in the views folder, and there was a file called welcome.blade.php. But that's not the case anymore, and so it can't find the view. And so that's why we're getting the error. We need to tell it that it's now in the pages folder. And so that's pretty easy. All we do is pages/welcome. And now it should work. So we're going to come back here. And we haven't updated those ones yet. So anyway, the home page works. It knows to go inside of the pages folder, and then it will find welcome. Okay, it already knows to go into view folder. That's what this tells it. And then you just tell it pages and then welcome, which just follows this structure right here. How I like to do it, and it doesn't matter what you do, but you have another option where you can use a period instead of a slash. And this will work exactly the same. If we refresh, we get the same result. And it just looks a little more object-oriented, and it's cleaner. It doesn't really matter. Do what you want, but I will be doing throughout this tutorials the period instead of the slash. So we'll do the same thing here. Pages.about and pages.contact. Okay, and now all these should work just as they did before. Perfect. Okay, now in the next video, we're going to go ahead and make our view a little more complicated, because we're going to pull in a little bit of dynamic data and dynamically fill it into these pages. Just a little bit. It's going to be a quick one, but I just want to show you that before we continue on and start getting into the more advanced stuff. And so obviously that's where controllers come in, is when you actually are starting to pass data into the view. That's when you're going to start to actually see where the controllers become useful. Because right now it's a lot of extra work kind of for nothing. All right, so I'll see you in part 5, guys. Once again, if you're jumping into this video right now, feel free to subscribe if you love the videos. This is a very detail-oriented tutorial, so we're going really slowly. The next video tutorials, we're going to go a little faster. I just want to make sure that everyone can really follow along and there's no excuses for getting behind. But if you get behind, you get lost, just comment below, and then I'll reply and try my best to help you out. Or maybe someone else that's having the same problem can help you out as well. So anyway, feel free to subscribe and like the video. That helps me a ton. And then subscribing will just make sure that you get the latest updates. Okay, guys, see you part 5.